the clinical landscape's very rich at the moment. So this is a field that has somewhat exploded in the last 10 years around stem cell therapies for Parkinson's disease. And really what we're talking about here, and I think it's important to understand this, is we're talking about stem cell therapies where the stem cells are turned into dopamine nerve cells of the type that are lost in Parkinson's. So this is dopamine cell replacement. We're not talking about stem cell therapies which are given to reduce inflammation or work in some other way to try and preserve the cells which are already there in Parkinson's. So this is very much about cell replacement. And really, I think the field goes back 15 years when it was discovered how you could make a stem cell into a dopamine cell in two labs in the world, one in New York and one in Sweden. And on the basis of that, people have learned how to turn these into dopamine cells using a manufacturing process which is of a clinical grade. And I think over this period of time, it's not only been possible to do that, which then opens up clinical potential, but it's also been seen to be very efficient. So it's a very efficient, quick process to make a lot of cells very quickly, which then makes them economically very attractive because the manufacturing runs quite short, it's quite cheap. And this intuitively makes perfect sense. I lose a couple of 100,000 dopamine cells. Why not just, to go and get Parkinson's, why not just replace them? So the landscape has somewhat taken off in the last few years. Claire's been very heavily involved with it, with these trials in the United States. I don't know how many are going on at the moment. There are four stem cell trials in individual patients that have been published to date. There are probably, I would think, at least a dozen or two companies around the world that are working in this space, moving into trials or in trials. And I think probably the best way to summarize it, and I'll be interested to know what Claire says about this, is that they're still very early phase. So, the number of people who've had these therapies in the published literature is about 30, it would be 12 plus 12, 24, 30, 31, 32 patients. So that's the total number we're talking about. There are obviously many, many more who are being treated at the moment. And what we can say is that essentially that it's shown to be feasible. So you can put stem cell derived dopamine precursor cells into the brain. These cells seem to behave themselves in the sense that they don't form tumors or anything else. They seem to stay where they're put. The clinical results are encouraging, but I would say they're not. There's still room for improvement, but nevertheless, they've been shown to have clinical efficacy in some studies more than others. So they do seem to have some clinical effect. The survival of the cells as based on imaging is a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes they survive, sometimes they don't. But it's all looking very encouraging, but it's not been proven. So all trials at the moment, anyone think of it, they are all essentially investigator-led trials. So they are trials which are still trying to prove whether these things work. And in terms of the most advanced, it depends what one means by that. So Japan has a very different licensing structure to the rest of the world. So they have now got the regulators have approved the use of iPS-derived dopamine cells Parkinson's over a 7-year period, which is how they work there, and then they review the data. In the US, the leading company would be, or the leading group would be the Blue Rock group, which Claire has worked with, who are now in a phase 3 study that began in the autumn of last year. So people are moving at different speed. In Europe, it's a bit slower. We've just completed the first European trial. We're now deciding where to go next with that type of work and whether we stay in Europe and the US. But it's really a global initiative. Everyone's trying to work together as much as possible to bring this to the patient as soon as possible. But the challenge is trying to do it, bring it as quickly as we can to patients, but as safely, and try and get as much information as possible. So it's a fast moving field, which is hard to keep up with. And it's very active. And that makes it very difficult for people not in the field, or even in the field, to actually keep up with what's actually happening everywhere. So, but I don't know, Claire, what your take is on, where trials have got to in terms of the ones which you think are the furthest forward and such like.
Oh boy. I mean, I was just thinking as you were speaking that when I'm sitting in clinic and someone asks me, is there and they have Parkinson's disease where it's not well controlled by medications and they look like they'd be a great candidate for an advanced therapy, and they're saying, well, we're talking about deep brain stimulation, magnetic resonance focused, guided focused ultrasound. And then they'll say, well, what about the experimental therapies? And it's just amazing because I've got several locally running clinical trials that I can suggest to them, and then we can talk about the pros and cons. So just thinking about, you mentioned the Blue Rock Therapeutics program, which is, I would say, definitely one of the leaders worldwide. And they actually went from the phase 1 clinical trial, and we're seeing more and more results of those coming out. We'll shortly get the 4-year follow-up. We have 3-year follow-up data that's out there. But they're, as you mentioned, in the phase 3 trial right now, and they actually started, from what I understand, that started enrolling, like more than 6 months ago at this point. So that's going to enroll around 100 patients with a sham surgery component. So we'll definitely be getting a lot more information out of that. Then, as I mentioned before, the product that's just been conditionally approved, let's say in Japan, is now in clinical trials in the US. So in the US, I can suggest to my patients to go and speak with those folks. And then these are more like it's really interesting. These are more like a one size fits all, right? It's a cell bank. People can be reassured that they're getting the same cell product surgically delivered to in an attempt to help their Parkinson's motor symptoms as the other people who are being studied in the clinical trial, and as the preclinical, those were used in the preclinical part of the work. What's really interesting now is that we're starting to see multiple groups who are looking at using autologous cells. So one thing we didn't mention, these the surgical delivery of the cells themselves is quite burdensome to the patient, right? But then if these cells are not matched, the vast majority of trials, at least all of the trials that I know about right now, are using some degree of immunosuppression. But if you get your own cells, that would obviate the need for immunosuppression. And I think that's really interesting. So we're seeing companies like Aspen who are, you said this is moving very fast and it's hard to keep up. They had just presented some of their initial data at the ADPD meeting. So this is coming out very quickly. And I am really excited to see what not just the cells that we're using now, but what's that next generation going to look like? Because the cells that we're studying now in clinical trials were really developed, as you mentioned, some time ago.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognise the differences as well between the trials. So I think there is an easy assumption to say that every single trial is the same, but Blue Rock use an embryonic stem cell. They use a particular type of immunotherapy. The group in Japan on which the conditional approval was given used an iPS cell, but it wasn't a frozen cell product. It was a run through. They use a less immunotherapy. So and whilst these are quite subtle differences, and for people not in the field, they would think, well, they all sound roughly the same to me. These subtle differences may account for some of the differences you see in the trials themselves. So I think it's important to recognise that the approach is the same and the strategy is generally similar, but the differences which exist in the protocols and how the trials are designed and delivered may be critical in some of the differences we're seeing in the results.
Oh boy, that's a great point. And actually, I'll just say related to that, isn't it fantastic to see this number of
Yeah.
research groups in the field competing?
Yeah, it is. And I would also say I would agree with that competing, but also the other thing is the spirit of the field is actually much more to work together. So it's not as though I'm trying to rubbish the opponents. It's all we're all in this together. Let's see if we can learn from each other, work together. And obviously there are financial interests in this, and there are companies involved. So that brings a slightly different perspective. But fundamentally, everyone's in it to try and make it give the patients a better therapy for their condition. And so one is all open to hearing what the people have to say to try and learn and move together as a community rather than necessarily as an individual research group or an individual group.